here we go. So I'm Josh Shabtai. I'm a Taurus. I'm also director of Lowe's Innovation Labs. I've been in Charlotte for about 3 years. I'm really excited to actually, a lot of the times I give talks, it's not to people in Charlotte. And so it's really nice to be with sort of a hometown crowd because I don't really have to explain what Lowe's is, I don't think. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what Lowe's Home Improvement? All right, good. Believe it or not, when I go to other places, I had this happen last week. They're like, oh, yeah, the movie chain. That's great, Lowe's. And I don't know if it's my body type or what it is that gets people to think I should be working in entertainment or something like that. Actually, just totally weird story about me. So Chris gave you the introduction. My background is all over the place. I was a creative director in advertising. I started a video game firm that was all about creating games that would immerse you in the fiction of that. And so we built the first augmented reality Star Wars games. Got into making connected toys, so trying to figure out how to make rich electronic toys that were cheap, that were super cheap and affordable for anyone to buy. We offloaded a lot of the smarts of those toys onto people's mobile devices because everybody's got them. So it was funny, when I made the move to North Carolina and to Lowe's, even when I told my parents, I was like, guys, there's a really interesting opportunity. I'm going to get to head up innovation here at Lowe's in North Carolina. My dad was like, that's amazing. He's like, you love movies. This will be great for you. And my dad, so I'm a first generation American. My dad was a non-English speaking immigrant who, to make ends meet when he first got here and put himself through school, he had a deck building company. Got a lot of his lumber at Lowe's, would bring me onto the decks when I was in a playpen. So I'm like, what the hell? You don't really understand it. Anyway, I don't have to explain any of that to you guys, which is the best. So I will give you just a quick intro to who we are as Lowe's Innovation Lab. So we are, as you would guess, the innovation arm within Lowe's. Our mission is twofold. We accelerate the experiences and capabilities that customers expect today, and we develop new capabilities, we develop new experiences that power tomorrow. And it's all through the lens of emerging technology. And we're fairly technology agnostic. So we're heavy up on advanced visualization and reimagining what the front end of retail can be. So you see a lot of augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D content development. That's been a big part of the work that we do. But we work in robotics, multiple kinds of robotics. So hard robots, loaded with cameras, computer vision algorithms, all kinds of stuff that we've actually put into real stores to help with inventory scanning and awareness, as well as we've done some tests to see if robots will be accepted by customers as a way to get you to the right light bulb aisle or something like that. But we've also worked with soft robotics, and a big portion of our work has been around creating assistive technologies that help our associates and that can potentially help the aging population of trade skill employees to be able to work longer, more safely, and more smartly. So soft robotics. We also look at things like advanced manufacturing, new methodologies for producing the products we sell every day, new means of fulfilling those products, whether it's you're looking at a 3D printed metal set of pliers, all the way to houses. We do a lot of stuff. And there is some cognitive dissonance when you hear that Lowe's invests in a group that does these kinds of things. And I have that cognitive dissonance on a daily basis. Some of my colleagues from Lowe's who are here too may have that cognitive dissonance. What I'm going to talk to you guys about today is it's not always about the work that we actually do, but the methodologies and processes that we practice to secure buy-in and sustain a vision and sustain that buy-in over the life of any individual project. And so I'm going to walk you through overall how we get past some common obstacles, and then a few principles that you can use. So, I added this last night so I could show you some video instead of just talking the whole time. I was going to talk over this, but this gives you a feel for the projects, not as two-dimensional visuals, but two-dimensional video. A lot of augmented reality stuff. We've done some really cool things with training our employees as well using VR, which has been a good time. There's our exoskeleton. All right, but let me just talk about the obstacles that we have to overcome to bring those kinds of projects to fruition. And I didn't ask, do any of you work in corporate innovation here? Okay, cool. So maybe some of these challenges are, whether you work in innovation or not, they're probably universal. The biggest one that we face time and again, I faced this too when I was an entrepreneur and I was licensing toy technologies at Hasbro, is building a shared long-term vision for innovation and working across matrixed organizations to bring lots of different stakeholders together with you. And the real catch there is not only do people have unique goals and unique focus areas within the company, they also have quarterly targets they have to meet. In retail, you have weekly targets you have to meet. How do you actually create a framework that can get everybody not just to say, oh yeah, I believe that the future of retail is over here, but that gets everyone to stay the course? And I'll tell you, we live in fast-moving times. Executives change, priorities change. How do you set a roadmap that can have a through line that continues despite that kind of disruption? That's something we deal with a lot. Separating signal from noise. I mean, this is one that probably drives everybody crazy. Every day, it seems like there are millions of new, well, not millions, but tens of new technology companies that come to our attention, sometimes in new fields, sometimes in existing fields, and it becomes a disaster to try to figure out how to say which one's important, which one's worth placing a bet on, which one's worth bringing to my executives. Who knows, which one will I kill myself because I missed it, you know? How you build a framework that can help us evaluate that stuff. And then lastly, this is something we deal with a lot, is deceptive disappointment. So some of our work is geared towards accelerating the here and now. But a lot of it is also seizing disruptive opportunities. And oftentimes the disruptive opportunities, they're disruptive for a reason. We can't see them coming. And oftentimes the technologies that may facilitate those look really crappy right now. And so you saw, for example, in that video I saw, just even looking at the exoskeleton, there were those really long, really rigid carbon fiber rods. Does not look like something people are going to want to wear. So guess what? When you show an exoskeleton that looks like that, your first response for people is, who's going to wear that? I mean, I would argue that VR, none of the headsets that are on the market, even the best ones, look like something that people want to wear. And we've actually seen people don't often want to voluntarily wear them. There's a lot of that. So these three areas, I would say, are the major obstacles. And the way we get around it is not by throwing more technology at people, by just looking really good. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I don't even know why I said that. That was really awkward. And it's not by PowerPoint, which is weird. It's weird that I'm giving you guys a PowerPoint, because PowerPoint doesn't sell a framework for innovation very well. But what does is story. And we're all wired, I think, no matter what technology. So it's interesting. This is like one of the first times, like, not everyone's glued to their phones. It's kind of good. It means I'm doing all right. I appreciate that. No one's like reading Twitter, which I kind of want to do now that I'm talking about it. But the interesting thing is we're so hungry for story that these devices we have, we're constantly feeding ourselves story, story, story. We're wired to enjoy that. And when you hear a story, your imagination is engaged. You start to understand concepts in a different way. You can relate to them. And at a biological level, good stories unlock chemicals in our body that do different things. So cortisol is, unlocked when you're experiencing stress. In the rising action of a good story, your body is producing stress. And if the story pays it off in a satisfactory, harmonious way, many people's bodies produce oxytocin. And as your body is unlocking that, you tend to have a more generous spirit. You tend to trust the person that is talking to you. Probably the reason I told you the story about my dad wasn't because I'm a nice person. It's because I wanted you guys to empathize and unlock oxytocin. And now you believe anything I will tell you, right? But I'll tell you, narrative is a really great pathway to combating those three obstacles I showed you before. And so the approach we take holistically, we call narrative-driven innovation. And you can read it just as well as I can say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. We use this process to catalyze a long-term vision and generate an actionable roadmap of work that in its best state we can validate and take to scale. And we do all of that through emotionally resonant, human-centered stories and storytelling techniques. So this is really what I'm here to talk about. I'm going to talk about 4 principles. Again, I hope these are things you can use. If not, this is a free talk. So really, I blame Chris. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to go through these one by one, how we arrive at the stories that we. So oftentimes, the first thing people ask me, I'll go back to that slide so you can take a photo of it. I will. Or I'll just email that slide to everybody afterwards. So the first thing, that people ask is like, all right, narrative-driven innovation, that sounds really highfalutin and fun. What does that really mean? And I always am like, we approach storytelling the way science fiction writers like Michael Crichton used to do, which is pretty straightforward. So even something like Jurassic Park started because he became obsessed with new revolutions in gene therapy, coupled with the fact that kids all over the place always play with dinosaurs, and it kind of took him on this path, but it started from a science. It started from some data points that he then turned into a story with compelling characters. And our formula for generating anything, and I'm oversimplifying it, but we look for a confluence of addressable problems and opportunities, and I'll explain how we do that. We combine them with an emerging technology area. Often, well, I'll explain sort of how we pick which ones. We then have built a network of artists and writers who will work with them and generate stories together. Sometimes the stories come to life in comic books, sometimes they're short films, sometimes they're just storyboards, but they all come together with a customer-focused narrative vision. So I'll walk you through the process and show you how each piece comes to life. So from an addressable problem opportunity. So we are structured, we have a product management structure, which shouldn't be foreign to many groups, and we have producers, product managers that are closely aligned to the business. And we will do this multiple times a year where we are gathering inputs. What are the strategic priorities for the company now? What are the strategic priorities for us moving forward? What are some really interesting trends that our store operations folks are uncovering? What are the needs of our marketing associates? And so we'll meet with our pro services team. We just spend a lot of time close to the business. But what we try to do is triangulate a bunch of different data points to start to find opportunities, right? And so in this case, I'm just showing you a few of the data points that add up to one of the projects that I showed you before. We found we have more than 300,000 employees. A number of those are stock associates. They spend a significant majority of their time twisting, turning, loading, unloading. It's very hard on your body, grueling work. Every time a Sears or H.H. Gregg goes out of business, an angel does not get its wings, but our appliance deliveries go up per store, right? And you would say that's a plus. It's a great thing for Lowe's. It puts more strain on the human. We've also, through work with the pro services team, I don't know if many of you are aware, there's a shortage of well-trained trade skills employees. And Lowe's actually has an amazing program in which we will help fund tuition for our associates to go back to school, learn a trade, no strings attached. There's estimated, we're going to have I think somewhere around the ballpark of 3 million trade jobs in 2028, and we're going to be understaffed. And a lot of those jobs are six-figure jobs. They're really good jobs. We need to get more people into the trade. So actually, that's one thing while I'm here. Guys, the trades, we need more tradespeople. But while we're short, the average age of our professional customers is going up. People are working longer. There's less safety net. So we start triangulating those kinds of things, which helps us start to move into a strategic area, which is there might be a suite of assistive technologies that can help on all of these fronts. And if we attack it in the right way, potentially create real advantage and a new, unique horizontal opportunity for Lowe's. We then have an ecosystem team. This is actually, I head up our ecosystem team. And we spend a lot of time out in the field, whether we're working with the venture community, whether we're working with insane cultural partners, or whether we're working with global technology companies like Google or Microsoft, to just try to hone in on what are the areas that have the greatest potential for disruption and growth for Lowe's. In this case, we've been studying quite a few areas. One we've been looking at is exoskeletons and this market for exoskeletons. We've been looking at a number of technologies, to be honest, that give humans agency in a time in which automation and all sorts of other technologies threaten to take that away from us. So this is one that's been really interesting to us. But what was also interesting is that the exoskeleton market is really starting to pick up in industries like automotive, healthcare, aerospace, candidly, industries that can afford multi-$1,000 suits. And actually, jumping back to my gaming days, just to give you sort of a frame of reference, I don't know if any of you guys remember a game called Skylanders. Remember this? It was a toy line, these big toys. They were like $15 an action figure, or $70 to $100 for the game, for your Wii or your Xbox with the toys. Those things were selling like crazy. And we saw incumbent toy companies really freaked out because these things were sort of eating their lunch. But when my company, we looked at it, we sort of said, okay, those toys are being sold at a higher price point to consumers of video games that typically retail for $59.99 a disc, right? So they can afford to do that. But more gamers are on their mobile devices than on a console, and the price of entry for that is free to 99 cents. So how do we actually completely disrupt the market economics of that kind of thing? This is similar. There's this really interesting industry to be disrupted. And so we're starting to look at those things and pull those insights all together, and we triangulate that through science fiction artists who end up creating a character-driven story that puts our customers, and in many cases our associates, at the center of that story. This was an interesting story. This wasn't a story about exoskeletons. This actually was a story about customers who were in need of recovery after a natural disaster and a vision for what our employees and our stores, new types of services they could offer in the future. And it pulled through a number of technologies into that, including the use of these assistive exoskeletons. And that was one of the things. We actually used this story originally, met with executives to basically say, these are technology areas that can be profoundly transformative for us in the future, but also have implications for today. And that led us to peeling off the exoskeleton bit of that story, including, and also some virtual training, some other things, and start working on it. In this case, we partnered with Virginia Tech, and we had the narrative to show them what we had in mind, and we worked with their assistive robotics laboratory, who are doing groundbreaking work in terms of rehabilitation, bringing mobility back to folks who are paralyzed, and actually said, hey, because you're working from a textile, passive system, you probably can get things to a price point that might be right for retail. And so we started down that path. And that's how we arrive at those things. Any questions about that first principle? We do a lot of research, and we translate into dramatic terms that kind of sell it to folks. Cool? Okay. So the second principle, it's not just about putting comic books. And a lot of people actually, when they hear us talk about narrative-driven innovation, they're like, oh, cool, I'll get some comic book artists and writers. And it's like, all right, it might work. But it's only one piece of it. The other component, another component of narrative-driven innovation is making the stories real. And there are lots of different reasons for that. There are some that are rooted in persuasion, but there are others that are rooted in actual testing. Sometimes the visions we have in these stories, we don't know if they're going to work, and you just can't know if they're going to work until you put them in a live environment. And so, for example, I mean, these are two stories that became real proofs of concept. We do this across the board. So I'm just showing a sampling of narratives that have guided our mixed reality and virtual reality work. And we've done a lot of different, explored a lot of different use cases in this space. So including visualizing how you undertake a project in new ways, how you fit product in your home and see the features. Anybody ever gotten lost in a Lowe's store? You know, like, yeah, I'm kind of, okay, good, there's like one other. We're actually looking at new pathways where how you navigate the store completely changes. We've told stories about the future of employee, pro, and do-it-yourself engagement, as well as radical new ways to look at the product. And all of those, you know, it's enough to have these nice narrative artifacts, but when we make them real and we put them in customers' hands, we start getting a better read for how they perform. And I will say, not in every case. For the earlier stage work that doesn't have precedent, we even apply techniques for gauging the effectiveness in a way that's not unlike how Hollywood studios will evaluate if a story is working when they're testing it. So we will actually use applied neuroscience methodologies where we strap an EEG reader onto people's heads, we calibrate it, so we're filtering out noise, and we're able to gauge a few key metrics. So we can see cognitive load, we can see motivation, we can see their emotional engagement. I can't tell you if you're happy or mad, but I can tell if you're having an intense emotional reaction. And then we'll cross-reference that with other usability studies, including like eye tracking for visual attention, other things like that. And I'll show you what that looks like. Well, before I do that, I'll give you an example. So if I were to go up to you and hand you a ball, and then I pointed like to a distance about 500 yards away, and I was like, okay, go get this ball in that hole. You just walk the 500 yards, you drop the ball in the hole. And at first the cognitive load would probably like spike for a minute, And then it would get really low because you're like, okay, I understand what I need to do. I'm going to walk over. Your motivation and emotional engagement would be really low as well. It's just sort of a weird, boring thing. But if I gave you a stick and I was like, all right, you have to get the ball in that hole, but using nothing but this stick, then all of a sudden cognitive load goes up, but so do the motivation and engagement metrics. And then all of a sudden you've changed it and you've created the game of golf and all that kind of stuff. So this is just an example. It sort of shows you how it looks. This was one of the neuro tests we did for an early version of our augmented reality mobile app. So you're seeing through the eyes of someone. And what you're seeing down here are two lines. You're seeing cognitive load and you're seeing motivation. So when cognitive load peaks, so let me say this. The moments where cognitive load and motivation both decrease, those are usually not great moments. The moments where they both spike are kind of what you want to hit. You want people to be engaged enough that they want to solve a specific problem. So there's some moments in here that are great. Moments like this are not good. When cognitive load goes up and motivation goes down, generally it means, and you can watch, someone doesn't know what they're doing. And they need help. They can't figure out, and that means our user interface is bad. This has been a great, we don't use it in every instance, but it's a great way, especially when you're introducing a technology for the first time, to start to establish a baseline. And one example that's interesting, so we've done a bunch of this kind of testing across multiple projects. So mobile, augmented reality, virtual reality, and HoloLens-aided experiences. But we've also done baseline neuro testing against the standard kitchen vignettes. So when you walk into a Lowe's store today, if you were to leave here and walk, you'll see there's kitchens that you can explore and get inspiration. Cognitive load trends much higher on average for those kinds of experiences. And we were like, what the heck? Like, it's a physical kitchen versus a helmet I have to wear to see a kitchen. And what we realized was even with the difficulty that people have right now with current UI for HoloLens, different mixed reality headsets, having some guidance, some software guidance, gives you direction, which you don't have when you typically walk into a kitchen. Another principle that guides what we do is, so we don't just tell individual stories and manage individual proofs of concept. We try to apply sort of a universe approach, and we're not going to do anything as well as Marvel in terms of managing really long form, over a long timeline storytelling, but there is something to this that we have in common with how we plot our innovation slate. And so, just the way that Marvel, they have had designs on a massive story with arcs that take a few years and multiple franchises that they're managing that all culminate in these sort of big event stories that help bring clarity to what the previous arc was about. But what's interesting about this is you can't control what's going to happen over 10 years. And if any of you guys, for example, saw the first Incredible Hulk, it had Ed Norton in it. They lost Ed Norton. You got Mark Ruffalo. They lost Terrence Howard at one point and got Don Cheadle. Things happen, personnel shifts, and you have to adjust accordingly. Or you discover that the actor you hired for Thor is hilarious, and you can actually go in a totally different direction. So they do a really interesting job of mapping out where they want everything to go, but being responsive. We take a similar approach, and I'm just giving you sort of a limited window into how this works. So our narratives aren't just like, hey, here's a cool, let's reimagine the role of the employee with exoskeletons or something like that. Or let's just focus on virtual reality training. We look at a distant point where there's narrative convergence, and a suite of technologies and a suite of experiences ultimately come together to transform what Lowe's can be for our customers. We'll see if this makes sense. This is kind of abstract. I'm getting used to talking about this out loud. We kind of don't often talk about this sort of thing. But each one of our POC tracks is its own narrative, right? Its own sort of narrative arc that we're managing. And each POC builds on the last. And so what we're trying to do is ultimately create an environment, and not just a narrative environment, but one in which we've built technology capabilities that can power all of these things, right? So in the stack that will ultimately power a story in which Lowe's is truly omnichannel, and so omnichannel that it's almost we have digital air rights, in people's homes. We have to have a content pipeline for 3D content. We have to understand processing. We have to have a variety of application partners, different things like that to build all that. And so this, again, it's a limited view in how we've managed 4 POC tracks that are all what I would say in the advanced visualization category. And we don't always know how they're going to perform, right? Some of these, I'll point to one. This is a famous example. The Hollow Room we were known for it may have been the first retail in-store virtual reality experience. We had store managers, after we did a 6-month POC, saying, you can't take this out of our stores. Sales are actually up, kitchen and bath. But as we got into it and we applied some of the neurometrics, we looked and we said, this experience, not even the neurometrics, even just getting people through the door to volunteer to go into the Hollow Room, it didn't justify the real estate, and the experience wasn't tuned, and it was really difficult to maintain and big, right? And this was 2015, 2016. And what we discovered, though, was having that in your store created a new conversation and connection between the customer and the associate, and that is what it was sort of a social lubricant more than it was the ultimate technology solution, right? And that helped us. We cut bait on certain manifestations that we thought at the time, this is going to be the be-all, end-all. It's not the be-all, end-all. And it actually led us to start shrinking and moving down to a mobile form factor just on this one track. And ultimately, we take that same approach to all of these to arrive at a place in which we've built foundationally different, distinct technology capabilities for Lowe's. I don't feel like I've done the best job explaining this, but man, we can get beers afterward. We should all go for beers afterwards, and we'll just start talking about narrative universe. But just to get it back, when you're thinking about how you want to present an innovation slate or strategy, the stories are extremely powerful illustrators of what you want to achieve in specific customer-facing terms. The universe can help you convey a sense of what you aim to achieve in the end, whether you hit it or not. And that's an approach we take. And then the last, really the last principle, this isn't related to our work output as much as it is how we approach the work. Technology, innovation, people, anyone, we all have big egos. We all want to invent something new. We all have to do that. But we're also in service of a lot of different people. And our team operates with this pretty simple story-driven principle, which is as much as you want to be, the Karate Kid, at best you're Mr. Miyagi, and that's even sort of a tough thing. You're usually just like a weird sidekick, like Corey Feldman in Gremlins or something like that. I don't know the age range of the room, so I may have missed. I may have whiffed. But we're in retail. And fundamentally, we are in service of our customers. And we here in Mooresville, Charlotte, are in service of our associates. And for Innovation Labs, the way we make sure we secure buy-in into a strategic long-term vision, the way we start to set a framework that makes it easier to set expectations for what technologies are worth pursuing, and the third one, we take that same approach to everyone we work with within the building. So our customers are obviously our primary protagonists. Our associates, equally important to us. And this is actually, this is a screenshot from when we were in the Virginia store rolling out the exoskeleton. We were walking them through the comic books, and we were actually telling them the story and helping them understand and see themselves in that. In that bottom left corner, this represents a planning session in which we partnered with stakeholders from throughout the business. For us to get across and bust through those obstacles that I mentioned before, we have to empower our business partners to be the heroes for all these things. We are enablers for it. And we've created some programs. We have an innovation council. We will do planning sessions in which we co-create these stories with key business stakeholders. So we're using their data, we're meeting their needs, and we are trying to draw a line between current day pain points and a far future for where we believe customers and the home and work experience are going to go. And then lastly, and this is kind of where I'm going to leave it off, we can open it for questions, are partners that help us bring these things to life. So in some cases, we build our own technologies, and in many others, we work with a variety of different partners. we try to empower our partners. This is a group that built the robotics program, and when we started with them, they were a small, single-digit person team that we helped self-actualize into a true robotics company. And we always look at, in any of our partnerships, how do we help our partners do just that, self-actualize? Because when that happens, you're actually, if everyone is on their own journey and they understand they are part of a narrative-driven process, you're better able to seize on serendipitous discoveries, and you inspire more people, and you start to become a magnet for all kinds of the good kinds of weirdos.